So hello and welcome to a very different episode of Back of the Net, the AFC Bournemouth podcast. My name's Sam Davis and with me this week is Mr. Jeff Hayward. Jeff, how are you?
Bit bored.
Not surprised. Well, as you can gather, there will be many C words being mentioned on this podcast. A little bit of Crystal Palace, a little bit of Cherries, a little bit of coronavirus. But don't worry, there won't be any Boris Johnson. You can get where I'm going with that. On this podcast, though, we've still got a good hour of content for you, which includes a chat with Scotty Dog Mitchell, the former BDO darts champion, who is starting to make waves in the PDC. I actually went over to his house last week, threw a few darts and chatted all things darts and Dean Court with him, finding out his opinion on the season so far. Jeff, is darts going to be something that you're going to be partaking in the next few weeks just to fill the void?
I'm not a natural, put it that way.
No, nor am I, and that was very evident in the week. But anyway, as well as this, we've got a little extra something that is going to while away the days on Twitter. We've been spending a long time over this, and it will involve each and every one of you at home having your say. So if you've not followed us yet, please do. We are at AFCB podcast. That's our Twitter handle. So if you don't have an account, you can sign up at twitter.com and just find AFCB podcast. So the announcement was made from the government on Thursday that the response to the outbreak will be delay rather than containment, and everything would carry on as usual. But then within hours or minutes even, the Premier League's hand was forced due to the news that Callum Hudson-Odoi and Mikel Arteta were said to have tested positive for the coronavirus. As a result, professional fixtures were suspended until the start of April at least. All accumulators were refunded. Our £20.47 in the funnel forecast bank account, that's gone back to us. So Cherries fans were also scratching their heads at what the hell to do on their Saturday afternoon. The good news was that there was some football locally by the way of the New Forest derby. The Terrors were in action as well. There was a Cherry link as well, as Josh McCoy netted for them actually in their 2-0 win over Slough Town. But other than that, Jeff, it was a hellish weekend, wasn't it?
It's not just football either, it's all sport. So any sport fan out there, we realise what a great distraction it is to watch any game. And I think it's inevitable. And I don't want to go into the bigger sort of COVID-19 conversation, but how it affects football and how it affects our club, I think that's really important. And yeah, I'm sure we'll go on to talk about that in a minute, but dull was not a word strong enough to describe Saturday afternoon. Empty. No,
completely. Now, one of the best places to be in a breaking news situation is usually Twitter. However, on this occasion, I found it a pretty bad place to be, given all of a sudden everyone seemed to have a PhD. They seem to gain a PhD overnight and were lecturing everyone on the consequences of the government action. Everyone keeps talking about it. There is a lot of hysteria about it. Of course, we've got to take it seriously because there are vulnerable people out there. It's interesting because some people think the government are doing the right thing. Others think they're doing the wrong thing. But whatever stance you take, I think we can all agree that people who are hoarding toilet roll are absolute tosspots. I just don't understand it. Even in my Sainsbury's local I went in, Jeff, and I thought it was one of these Twitter things that people maybe go into certain stores and find it. But even in my local convenience store, no toilet roll. I mean, at one point, I thought I'd have to move on to plenty kitchen rolls.
Same for me. And in fact, the local Asda, where we are, there was a fight over toilet rolls.
No.
And it's not just toilet rolls, pasta as well seems to have. There seems to be a run on pasta, which is weird. And I noticed that confectionery seems to be going as well. So all we can imagine is that people are sitting at home eating spaghetti and chocolate and spending a lot of time on the toilet.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the Premier League decided to rightly suspend its fixtures based on the sort of footballing side of things. Even at AFC Bournemouth, Artur Boruc was showing signs consistent with coronavirus, and 5 members of staff also seem to be affected too. And Jeff, with La Liga suspended, Ligue 1 matches suspended in France, Italy on lockdown, did the eventual suspension come as a surprise to you?
I think events moved really quickly. As soon as that Hudson-Odoi and Arteta news broke, it was inevitable. I was really surprised that Wolves were made to travel to Olympiacos, and I thought those Europa League games on Thursday were it was very strange decisions from UEFA. And I think what you're getting a sense of is UEFA aren't really in control. All the leagues are making their own independent decisions. Italy obviously moved first, and I think in Italy it feels like they're about 2 weeks ahead of where we are. So they cancelled their league fixtures. The first cancellations were a couple of weeks back, and ours sort of happened round now, which is no surprise. I think if you look at that timeline, I think what's really interesting is they've cancelled up till April the 3rd at the moment in the Premier League, but if you map what is going to happen to the virus and where that is going to go, we're not going to reach peak until the middle of May, I don't think. And
that's right.
And then, okay, so the implications of that are really very significant, and very significant for our club too.
For sure. So yeah, I was watching some of those European games, and it was a really bizarre atmosphere. The was it the Man United game against Leicester, played behind closed doors? They won 5-0, but you could hear this kind of random chanting. Some of it was coming from outside the ground. It was just really weird, very soulless when they scored, and that was one of the options that people were saying before the news about Mikel Arteta came out. But playing matches behind closed doors, I don't think it's anything that anyone really wants to see. I mean, as it is, would we see them? Apparently they would maybe reverse the 3 p.m. blockout, but it's not exactly fair, is it? Because each and every team has got their home advantage. So to play matches behind closed doors, it's not great.
Well, yeah, precisely. And I think it just destroys the nature of the competition to play games behind closed doors. I mean, the home fans play a role, whether you like it or not. It's home advantage, and home advantage counts because you got all the fans behind your side. Makes a difference on the pitch. To play games behind closed doors completely neutralises that, and it's not proper football, is it?
No, that's right. And even in sort of European competition, I question where some matches, like first legs, have been played in front of a crowd, and then the second leg hasn't. Where's your home advantage after that? And then, why is it more of an advantage to score an away goal in that case if it's neutralised? There are lots of different scenarios that can be thought of with regards to the behind closed doors scenario. But yeah, as it is, the fixtures were postponed. We were due to play Crystal Palace, and I was actually looking forward to that fixture, Jeff, because I thought everything was going our way. You saw the training video, didn't you, of David Brooks coming back, Dan Juma. Obviously, we had no Steve Cook, but I was really looking forward to it.
Oh, it was going to be a massive game. And I think the momentum with those players training, whether they might have made the bench, might have been quite an interesting call from Eddie. It felt like that was a game we could win. And I just feel... Now, what happens next? If those games become, let's say we get back to play it after April the 3rd, and those games become midweek games, it on the one hand, it means that those players will ultimately be fitter, presumably. Although, how on earth do you carry on training in isolation? And how is that going to work? I struggle to see how we can get those fixtures done within the current timelines. The word is that the Euro 2020 championships are pretty much nailed on to get postponed, and that then would allow the leagues, the Premier League, to delay fixtures even further than they currently are. But that presents other problems, and the biggest one, I think, that not many people seem to be talking about, is that most players are contracted until the 30th of June.
Yeah, that's right. So what happens with the Ryan Fraser situation, for instance?
Will he actually be able to play for us even if fixtures go beyond that? And that is a massive issue, I think, for a lot of Premier League clubs. They'll be playing with uncontracted players who might just refuse to play, I guess.
it seems to be universally regarded that this kind of best case scenario of start of April is probably not going to happen. And when you see the graphs that are published with the sort of peaks and troughs of this virus, this delay phase is supposed to move it on. Now, the reason why they're doing it is to give a little bit of sort of manageability in terms of the numbers for the NHS, because obviously they're going to be under strain. I've got friends who are nurses, and even now they're up to their eyes and they do a magnificent job. But it seems like it's only going to get worse. So how on earth are they going to be playing these matches when this virus is still around? I can't see it happening. So there are a number of scenarios that could happen. Watching Football Focus yesterday, you heard a number of opinions, and Karen Brady's been on social media saying what she thinks about it. But yeah, obviously the first thought is that we postpone for now and pick it up in April. Probably unlikely to happen. As you say, the Euros are likely to be put back. So, okay, scenario number one, end the season as it is now. Why can't we do that?
I think we can't do that because we'd get relegated.
Yeah, that's the main reason. But also it's unfair because Aston Villa have played a game less, so they could get out of trouble.
Yeah. No, and I think the Premier League is very conscious about having its backside sued for that as well. And I think that just it won't stand up in court. Any club that gets relegated, I mean, we stand to lose 100 million through not being in the Premier League, if in terms of income, and you are not going to allow the Premier League to get away with a decision that is
exactly. And I think the integrity of the competition would be under massive scrutiny and dispute. I mean, we were resting certain players against Liverpool, like Josh King. Apparently he could have played against Liverpool, but we were resting him because we thought we could use him against Crystal Palace in the next game. So it's I think that's a scenario that many people are discounting. But of course, some of the people who feel very hard done by are Liverpool fans, regardless of the situation, because there's also a chance that it could be voided.
Well, that, I think, presents other issues. Liverpool being 25 points ahead, they only need to win one more to be mathematically crowned champions. I mean, if they don't win it this season, that would be a disgrace, I think, no matter which side you support. So I think the voiding issue presents problems for teams that are due to get promoted. I mean, Leeds and West Brom. West Brom are 6 points clear of third place at the moment, and I'd feel pretty hard done by if I was a Leeds fan, top of that championship, having put 5 wins together in a row now, not to get promoted. Can I see that happening? No. I also believe that they are meeting next Thursday, the Premier League, where they're actually going to make these decisions. UEFA meets on Tuesday, where they're going to formally cancel the Euros. I'm pretty sure about that. And on Thursday, I think one of the options that might get considered would be to stop playing now, have the team that is top and the teams that are in the promotion places, actually they can get promoted and they can win the title, but having the relegated sides don't get relegated, they stay in the division. And I think the teams that lose out in that would be the one playoff place in each of the 3 divisions. But that to me probably makes more sense than a complete voiding of the season. Because you could then, have 4 teams relegated from the Premier League for the next 2 seasons, have more fixtures, and actually, that wouldn't create too many issues, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. Now, the way myself and Jeff are talking, obviously there are wider and more important issues than just the sport itself. Obviously, there are vulnerable people, but obviously during this podcast we are just talking about it on a football level. So do make sure you wash your hands and do all you have to do. So don't think that we are brushing over the subject or trying to sort of minimalise it by talking about football in this way, because it obviously is very important to listen to the government sort of guidelines on this. But there are several issues, and also the European places as well, Jeff. Who qualifies for the Champions League?
Well, I think that again is a huge issue. If I'm a Sheffield United or a Wolves fan or a Manchester United fan, they've got a chance of making the Champions League next year. Yeah, what on earth are UEFA going to do about that? I can't see a route out of it. I'm afraid. So yeah, it was
Really
really
difficult.
tricky. And also the other thing, we shouldn't forget that the broadcasters are hugely important in football. You know, the money that comes from the broadcasters really important to funding a lot of clubs. Um, and they are going to have a say because revenues for them are going to be, you know, massively hit with the last if the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks get voided or
Yeah.
stopped. Surely actually the biggest priority will be try and get this season finished. I'm just struggling to see practically how they can do that.
Yeah, time-wise, I mean, some people have been suggesting merging the seasons, so you're basically starting next season with the end of this one. But I don't know. There is going to be a lot to come out of it. I mean, apparently some people are saying that there's a 75% chance that the season will be voided. In which case, I mean, it's good news for AFC Bournemouth. If Leeds and West Brom get promoted, fine. But obviously, that's a smaller chunk of TV money that goes to each of those sides. But relatively, it's not. A major difference when it's just two extra teams. I feel for the clubs that are in the mix for third place or the playoff place, but that's always a lottery as it is. So there's only one team that misses out, and it's not like you can say it's going to be a certain team. So obviously the top two, they would feel very aggrieved at missing out. And if Bournemouth got relegated on the fact that, let's stop the season right now, well, I mean, there would be lawsuits all over the place, as you say. So that's something that's been mooted in the German league as well, I think, expanding the field by another two teams and then having more teams being relegated on the subsequent season. But the scenario that we're in is absolutely unprecedented. Now, there's been another scenario that someone has said there should be some playoff matches to decide the fate of Europe and relegation.
No way. How are you going to do that? I mean,
God knows.
Honestly, that they're going to be looking for clarity on Thursday. They're going to be looking for something that's got everybody on board because the risk of there being legal action from so many parties in all of this is huge. And I just hope that people are sensible and realise that it is an unprecedented situation. Let's just try and resolve it in the best way that we possibly can with the greatest clarity and simplicity, because also the players have got to have a break. You can't expect them to. And also, actually, here's another thing. After, let's say they take 4 weeks off and they're all in isolation, maybe they've got personal trainers going in and working with them, but they're not going to be doing team training sessions because that's not going to be possible.
No.
So what are you going to do? You need to have a minimum, I'd say, of 4 weeks of a team training together to get back to where you were. Otherwise, it's like the summer break now, and you expect them to go straight back to playing straight away after that. It's not realistic.
Surely a lot of it's going to be dictated by what happens with the Euros. I mean, it looks likely, as you say, that it's going to get pushed back to 2021. But surely it's got to be, because if it wasn't going to shift, then there is no way that this season will be completed on time. And, it would have to be voided or pushed on to the following season, which I just can't see happening. So it's a really bizarre situation that we're in now, isn't it? Have you got any idea how you're going to be planning your days? Trips to IKEA?
Do you know? I think I haven't really thought that far. I'm adding loads of movies to my Netflix list this morning, and taking the dog for a lot more walks. I guess it's gonna be a really fascinating next few weeks just to see how dull it all gets. And I'm fearful for a lot of businesses that are connected, not just with football but across the country. This is going to be really tough. I would hate to be in the airline business right now or anything connected with tourism.
Goodness. Well, that's a big concern, and obviously, I mean, I'm self-employed, but I design websites, so I should be all right, and I don't think there'll be much effect on that. I mean, granted, two of the websites that I'm currently doing at the moment are based on serviced accommodation. So there's one there's a group of gîtes in France that I'm doing some websites for at the moment. Also, there's a number of apartments in down in Cornwall, and they're probably going to be less likely to want to pay on time given that what's going on. So I might have to be chasing them down on this. But also people in the sports industry. So chatting to Chris Temple the other day, obviously we played a bit of his interview recently on the podcast. The full interview's on YouTube. He's a sports journalist, and his main employment is through sport, whether it's being on the mic behind, for Radio Solent, or whether it's doing stadium events. There's people like him that are going to be kind of worrying as well. So it's, there's a lot of concerns about this virus, isn't there?
And I think the paranoia stretches right the way down. I mean, I'm sure, what with your glory in the recent six-a-side clips that I saw, Sam, are you thinking about cancelling that? I mean,
you know what? No, we're playing tonight. We're playing tonight, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm tempted to live stream it just so people have got some football to look forward to. What?
Don't play it on slow-mo, though, like you did those clips, all right?
Slow-mo, that was fast-paced. My goodness, yeah, we were a bit lax that night, but yeah, it's a good chance to have a kick around. And I scored 4 goals. I was check Twitter and have a scroll back through the media timeline and see my finishing. It's not the best, but nor the defence. So,
I was reading a report this morning from Alan Devonshire, the ex-West Ham player who's now manager of Maidenhead. And they played their game because they're a National League team. So they played their match against Stockport yesterday. And he's got an 88-year-old mum. And he was saying, it's crazy that we're playing and I'm mixing with all these people because I've got an 88-year-old mum. And you think, he's got a point. It's not just... Why should we just think about it being the Premier League? And in fact, I'm sure this week they're going to ban groups of more than 500. So the National League will get, kicked out too. And if any public gathering, everybody's going to be super nervous about anything. And it's worrying times. And I'm not quite sure what the route out of it is, if I'm completely honest with you. Hopefully it'll be a bit clearer after the meetings this week. But let's look at it from a Bournemouth perspective. The players that we've had long-term injured, or the players that have been just injured, like Steve Cook, well, it certainly gives them a chance, should the league complete later in the season, to get back a bit fitter, which would be great. So that plays to our advantage. Although, what was it Alex Deutsch said, 4 years from now, it'll probably still be a few days away from Lloyd Kelly making his debut.
That was a great tweet. And there's been a lot of good humour that's been going around on Twitter and on Facebook that I've really enjoyed. Obviously, it's a very serious subject, but Britain does what it does best by making light of various situations that we're in. So it should be an interesting few weeks and maybe months ahead. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you. Self-isolating as you can see. So
good man. Up the cherries, and we'll see you in the next video.
Yep. See ya.